So if you want to ask questions, feel free to do so along the way. This is part of the cross-country endorsement that I do with a few add-ons. So no apologies. It's all to do with really the silver distance flight, but read across to any sort of cross-country that you do, especially when it comes to the maps. So, he said, pressing a button and hoping something will work. There's a whole load of stuff in there, which I'll zoom through at a varying speeds. First of all, then, airspace. We've got 5 categories of airspace that we need to consider. Class A, which is IFR, which is Instrument Flight Rules Traffic Only. Class C, which IFR and VFR can go in, but we do need clearance. So you must be talking to an ATSU, which is an Air Traffic Service Unit. Not very common. When I wrote this, there's only one that I knew of, which is near Huntingdon. And if anybody's got a 1/4 mil map, you'll be able to find it on the map. I think there's another one just north of Liverpool, but I'm not absolutely sure on that one. Class D, again, IFR and VFR, but you do need clearance, and that's typically around major airports. Class E, I'll be honest, is Phil Donovan listening? Because he's usually up to speed on these. Class E, I've no idea if there's any in the UK, but anyway. And then Class G is open airspace.
I think it was mentioned in Scotland, Paul. I'm pretty sure they said some of the airways on that lecture that we had from Sant, that there's some Class E in the airways up in Scotland, I believe.
Yeah, it's in effect, as we'll see in a moment, it really doesn't make any difference. So Class G, you can do anything. Here we've got just an interesting one graphic, because there you can see the controlled airspace. It makes a little bit more sense than when you're looking at your half-mil map in terms of the corridors which link the major airports and also routes to and from various places. So looking at that, it makes slightly more sense. We are under the Daventry control area, which, if you can see me there, it used to be Alpha 1, which now extends more north of Manchester, but certainly when I started flying, Alpha 1 was all the way up. We've also got here, we've got FIRs, which are flight information regions, and we have got Scottish FIR, which is basically just south of Scotland, and London FIR. Those are broken down into furthers, which I'm not going to, smaller regions, but I'm not going to go into that. This is the interesting one. Some of you may have seen this already. Basically, we've got IFR on the top line, but then, which is what we're interested in, is VFR. And the thing that we have to be careful of when we are planning routes, this is the reason for putting it up here, is that what we need to be aware of is distances from clouds. Right, so he's saying here we've got to remain 5 kilometers clear of other aircraft. We've got to be below above 140 knots. Whereas over here, sorry, we're clear of cloud, but as soon as you go above 3,000 feet, you've got to be 3,000 feet clear. Sorry, 1,000 feet clear of cloud. Same here, technically, although we are allowed to go up to cloud base. So you have to be aware of those before you go into. That is available, as it says, on the CAA site, and I'll probably put that up somewhere in the clubhouse.
So Paul, if you go into a Class D airspace, for example, you can go up to cloud base if you're below 3,000 feet, but then if you need to go a bit higher, the 1,000 feet rule applies, is that it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And you've got to remain 1,500 meters horizontal from it as well.
Okay, so up to 3,000 feet is sort of normal glider flying, but then above that, you just have to be mindful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and again, just to illustrate the types of things that happen. So you'll have air routes, which are typically above flight level 195, airways, which are transition level up to 195, control areas, which are based usually on altitude, but some of them are flight levels, and then you've got control zones, which are usually Class D. So that's a representation of what we could do, because as we've already established, you can go, for instance, into a control zone, which is Class D, if you've got permission. Right? You may be refused it, right? But you certainly in today's environment, there's a good chance that you will be allowed to go into Class D. So it depends upon traffic at the time. And those that are doing the Fertile course will know that there's a certain way of doing that. But I'm not going to go into that now. Right, so what have we got? We talk about aeronautical charts, and the interesting thing here is the half mil, as we term it. That's the one that usually used because it displays the controlled airspace. And if you go back to the illustration I put up before, you can see this airway going up here and then cutting across to go into either Liverpool or Manchester. And that's important for us, but there's not an awful lot of ground detail. So for identifying things on the ground, not that good. There's another one, which is the 1 mil, and not used very often because you've got even less in terms of the ground detail. If you want to, you can use quarter mil. And I know in my early days of power flying, I had quarter mil maps as well as my half mil because it gives you quite a lot of information. For instance, if you follow my pointer, you can see Leeds Bradford here. It gives you the configuration of the runways, which was useful. And also it gives you a slightly better layout in terms of built up areas. But it's a very small scale, so you need lots of maps. So as I said, half mil is usually what we use. Now then, many people, and my apologies for those that have had a good look at the half mil map. There's lots of information on them, and it gives you conversion tables. It gives you what the symbology means. It even gives you Morse code. Not that we're likely to use it. It also tells you a whole range of things here, through from what the markings on the chart are, and also the difference between the airspace, and everything that you're likely to know will be in there. Symbology as well. Gliders. Here we've got a whole range of things which are going on, but it's giving you the heights that they are need to be regarded. So if you see something on that, you can always refer back down to this. Also, you'll find that there are scales at the bottom as well. So you don't necessarily have to have a rule in nautical miles or kilometers or anything like that. A bit of paper, and you can mark it off and look on the bottom of the map. And again, all of the bits and pieces that you need in there. Okay. Right, so just looking in this area, just looking in terms of some obstructions, because the interesting one here, this area, you've got some masts here, and you've got two figures, and if you look at it, you can work it out quite easily what they are. It's 524, which is giving you the height or the altitude for flying on QNH, but the mast itself is 500 feet high. So that's why we've got two sets of figures in there. Looking at other areas as well, it will every now and then it will give you a spot height, so you can see what is around there. So if you look over here, for instance, in this area you've got 994, over here you've got 1526. So that is height above sea level. Again, useful when you are planning, as we'll look at later on, is deciding, well, okay, in that area, what is going to be my minimum safety altitude if you're flying on QNH. So we always advocate that you're seriously starting to look at fields below 2,000 feet AGL. So if you know what the height of the surrounding terrain is, that may mean, like it, for instance, in the 1526 in this area here, I would be seriously looking at fields at 2,500 feet to 3,000 feet indicated. Not that there would be many around there because it's quite hilly, but you get the principle. Here's our local area. So we've got Seaford around here. You see we've got Stafford, we've got a spot height there, 451. We've also got at Seaford, we've got our airfield elevation and the 2.4 saying cables up to 2,400 feet. Okay. So loads and loads of information to look on the chart. Okay, so moving on to weather monitoring. I didn't see Graham Stanford in amongst the list of people. He's much better at this, but if you're thinking of doing a task somewhere, I would advocate looking something like 3 or 4 days ahead to start identifying good conditions that are coming up. Now, for instance, I was looking at the charts earlier on, and tomorrow and Friday we've got some fronts coming through. Saturday, unfortunately, is looking very windy, but Sunday is looking reasonable. Right, so I've got a general picture of what's going on. So if I was planning to do a cross country, Sunday would be the day that I would be looking for. And what I do is I look at RASP. I'm a cheapskate, I am. It's free to use. You've got others, Top Meteo, SkySight, which you get quite detailed information, and I've no idea how much they are, but I know that there is a subscription to them, and they're quite good. Having said that, they use the same data that RASP does. So just to jump out for a second, here is this RASP is live now, and the things that I look for are the viewer, and if we look at the viewer one, there we go. We've got options here of what we want to do. So we've got thermal height, surface temperature, wind, and so on. And the nice thing is that you can look at it and you can see just by referring here as to what is happening. That's obviously for today. Sorry, I've zoomed in on it then. But you can also look, for instance, for Thursday. And again, it will come in and show you these different possibilities. So tomorrow, for instance, we've got Birmingham here. We've got areas not very good lift, but as we go further east, it's better. So again, that's giving me an idea as to the sort of planning that I could have. The other one I look at is the blip stop maker, which is the one that we usually show in the morning. So here we'll do just for the sake of it, let's see what it says on Saturday. Yeah, Seifert Hanger. So we'll generate the list, and there we go. So you can see its thermal height's looking not too bad. Boundary layer, which is where in effect the cloud level is stopping being active. We've got a good temperature separation, but they're very close together at the day, so I don't expect thermals to be too brilliant with not much of a separation or divergence. The wind is looking very windy. It's saying 25 knots at ground level here. If it's that, I shall be sitting firmly on the ground. Wind direction and all the others that we see in the morning. There's a slight hump there, which is 100 feet. So it's not actually it's going to slow you coming down. There's going to be no lift around. So RASP is very, very good for doing those types of things. There are the other one which I will also use, and again, if I'm planning on doing a flight, I'll look at the potential flight distance. And here it gives you the daily forecast. So this one is today. So it's saying, yeah, it's reasonable in this area. Tomorrow it's looking slightly better. Friday is looking pretty dismal. And Saturday is looking pretty dismal as well. So again, these are tools for you to start looking at the weather. And this is a good one because if you're going to do a silver distance, for instance, that one is saying that a 400k is quite possible. So tomorrow, if we could fly, would be a reasonable day for distance. Okay. If you haven't looked at it, my suggestion is to go to RASP and play about with it and look at all the various bits and pieces that you can do. By the way, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to unmute and ask.
Yeah, Paul, it's Dave Shepherd. It's interesting that you don't mention the Met Office website.
Yeah, I don't because I do because I look at it in terms of the synoptics, but the RASP gives me potential flight distances and thermal activity, whereas the Met Office is not very good for doing that. So I will certainly look at it in terms of the synoptic. And again, if I come out of this, I've got it on. And there was something I was looking at earlier.
Yeah.
All right, so that gives me an overview of what is happening. I've timed out on that one, but yeah, it is good, but it's not necessarily my primary.
Yeah.
And again, as you can see, the Met Office only do their synoptic charts up to 3 days in advance, whereas RASP will go a little bit further.
Yeah, you have to pay for more than that, I think. Yeah.
Well,
Well, if we go on like to the next one, that 546 line, I remember that being mentioned on, I think it was on WhatsApp some time ago. I don't quite understand what the significance of that is.
546.
Yeah, if you go back onto that.
Was it in RASP?
No, on that synoptic you were looking at earlier.
On the surface pressure, Paul.
Is it this one?
There's a dotted line that says 546 and 564.
Ah, right. Those are temperatures. So it's lines of equal temperature with height, and it isn't a pure temperature, but it's to do with temperature and air masses. I'll be honest, I don't know it fully, but there is an explanation on the Met Office website.
Okay, thank you.
And I can't remember it off the top of my head. Right, so as I was saying, what I usually look at, table view gives you an overview. Blip spot maker, I can look at specifics and the potential flight distance, which gives me an indication of my likely conditions en route, or even in which direction I'm going, because it can be that one side of the country is not very good and the other side is better. Next thing is NOTAMs. Sources. That's AIS, Spine, and Sky Demon. I use all three. Again, if I come out of this and I go to NATS, you have to set this up. I've got an account with them and I can log in just to show you what's going on. So and here, once you've got in, you can either have an area brief, a route brief, a narrow route brief, a point brief, whole loads of things. What I do is I've set up and I save my previous briefings. And what I do is I actually do a narrow route. So here we are. So you'll see EGCV to EGBM. EGCV is the IRCO code for Slape going to Tainton Hill. So I'll use that. And it gives you a briefing ID. And incidentally, that briefing ID is then kept against your name. So as a power pilot, especially when I'm flying the tug, I want to know if there's any NOTAMs. By accessing this, I can prove that I've looked at NOTAMs. If somebody tried to be silly with me, in terms of saying, well, you flew when you shouldn't have done. Well, I'll say, well, if the NOTAM wasn't around when I looked at them, then I didn't stand much chance. Anyway, it is from 1900 till 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. In the morning, fairly obviously, it will be another 12-hour period. And what I've chosen is VFR information only, up to flight level 195. And my narrow route between those is 20 nautical miles wide. So when I put that in, I will then get a load of information which will come out, and I'm hoping it's still on. Slape is not going anywhere. Earlier on when I checked it, Tainton Hill was closed because they were doing painting numbers on the runway. And then you can run through all of these to see what is or may be of interest to you. And when you look at them fairly quickly, they put in like fast and down. I'm not going to go in that direction, so I'll ignore that one. And I'll keep on going through until I find something there. So special event, SSR is secondary surveillance radar. That's around Plymouth, so I can avoid that. Then we've got loads of COVID information. Now, here's an interesting one. You may be going through a danger area which is activated by NOTAM, and here's a NOTAM which is actually a activating one. So there we can see it's from the 19th of May to the, I can't read that, 3rd of July. And the temporary danger area, which is D398, it's in the Carnarvon complex, and it's got remote controlled systems. Right. So, if I was doing some mountain flying in that area, which people from Denby do, then I would be looking out very, very well, because if anything saw me, if I saw anything, it wouldn't see me. So that's another bit of information. And so on. You can get, I'm not going to go through them all, but it gives you an idea. It also gives you, those are general warnings, and these are actual navigation warnings which could go on. And again, during the summer, not at the moment, but sometimes you'll see in there, for instance, the red arrows that are transiting, and it may tell you the route or indeed where they are actually going to be displaying. Right, so lots of information. If you don't do those, the other useful one, I'll just get rid of this for a second, is to go to Spine. And again, it's free, and you can set up how you want it to read. And I've got mine centered on Seaford. So we've got that, okay. Problems of live. Right, so I've done all those. So I'll download all the information. That's all been plotted, that's all been downloaded now. And if I plot it, there I have got a representation of the information that's around us with Seaford right in the middle. So what I've asked for is a 20-mile radius around it, anything that's in there. So here, see, we've got a danger area 211, which is Swinnerton, but you can see there's nothing in there to tell me that it's been activated.
Question from me, Paul. I've read about forms 214 and 215 in terms of weather. Yep. Are they something that you would use? Obviously, there's that much information, isn't there, in terms of weather? But I was just interested in 214 and 215.
The 214 and 215 are issued on the day, so they are certainly things that you would use. I know I can never remember which one it is. 214 is the wind, and that's the one that you would look at if you are putting your wind arrows, as we look at later on the map. And typically you would use the 2,000 foot wind on the 214.
Okay. Paul, just on Spine, it's probably worth mentioning that if you've got XC-SAW, you can save the NOTAM output from Spine as an airspace file and load it up to XC-SAW. So you can load up the NOTAMs as well as the normal Class Ds and so on for that particular day.
Right, yeah, fantastic. I'm sure there are people who have played around with it more than I have done. It's unfortunate I'm old school in that I was taught to go and look at the NAT site because that's where all other information is derived from. It's my power head on. I always use that because it leaves a record of the fact that I've looked at the NOTAMs. It's not user friendly, but once you've used it, as I have for quite a few years now, I can scan through it very, very quickly and pick up relevant information.
Just can I ask a question on the Spine thing? Can you not, from memory, I thought you could download the thing off NATS and then read it into Spine. So you've got that reference that you looked at it on NATS, even though you read it more user friendly in Spine.
I don't know.
Yeah, you can. You can do that. You save the NATS output as a text file, and then you load the text file onto Spine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. It used to be many years ago that the NATS would freeze NOTAMs at 6 o'clock the previous day. They've changed that in recent years, and now it's almost a live document. And the problem is, if my understanding is correct, that Spine will be several hours behind NAT's actual site. So it's not a live interface, is my understanding. I'm quite happy to be corrected on that, but that's my understanding. Okay, so you've been looking at the weather and seeing when is good. You've looked at NOTAMs certainly in the morning, and then in the days previously to see if there's any long-standing ones. So the next thing comes is the preparation for your route.
Oh, you didn't mention Sky Demon for the NOTAMs, and that's
yeah, that's
really
well,
good. It does stay up to date, and it
yeah.
gives you really easy to read presentation.
Yeah, it is. That's very good as well. Sky Demon, I am happy to use in a powered aircraft because I've got more room. It gets very small on the screen when you're actually in the glider. So for reference, yes, Sky Demon. My apologies, I should have put it on there. But in flight, I'm not so sure, to be honest.
Well, I mean,
it's entirely to individuals, but I wouldn't rule.
You can read it on an iPhone, but I mean, once you've read it for the day, it's not likely to change during the day anyway.
Absolutely, yeah.
In terms of the NOTAMs.
Yeah. Okay, so let us do our favourite, and that would be, if we're doing a Silver Sea, one of the favourites is to Husboz. So there is the half mil. So again, if you can see, that's now been highlighted over here, and there we have, we've got the other one highlighted there. So first of all, what we need to do is just draw an actual or imaginary line between the two. And as soon as you draw that, what sort of issues do you think you've got with that? And if you were listening to Derek Heaton's presentation last week, is it last week? Yeah, last week. He used the same course, and obviously what we've got here is a potential conflict with the airspace around Birmingham, around this area here. So what I would do, you can either use Hickson or from to keep you not planning to go that close to the airspace. So we then look at the route and we interpret it. First of all, we look at it in terms of the wind velocity. So in our example, it's going to be 250 at 15. That's the 2,000 foot wind. We look at airspace, any ground features, minimum height, which I took on already, and local radio frequencies. So first of all, a few people have asked me this, and I always respond. In the powered world, you tend to fly along and you've got a map and you've got a thing called a plog, a pilot's log. I don't think that we have enough room in the cockpit for bits of paper to be floating around. When I was taught navigation, even powered, was you write everything on the map. So you've only got one thing that you've got to worry about. So the very first thing I do is actually draw an arrow on the map with the wind direction and speed off the track, but close enough for you to keep a check on it. So it just keeps it in mind all the way through your flight as to what the potential effect is. And as we can see here, the effect is it's going to drift me to the east. So that means that my line here, which is, it's only a datum line, it's not what I'm going to follow, it's just a datum. It means that that is actually quite good because I have got more room to the east than I have to the west. Next thing I want to do is start looking at airspace. So what are the issues? So here we've got, as we know, we've got 5.5 over the top of the field, but then it drops down to 4.5. Then we go down to 3.5. Over here, it's down to 3,000. Here, it's at 1,500. There it is. I'm reading it as I'm going through. It's 2.5. and there it's 4.5. And those are all the bits of airspace that I'm likely to go into whilst I'm flying. There's another area down here which is 2,000, but at this point there's quite a large gap there, so I'm unlikely to be going in that. So I'm not overly bothered. But here I'm going to be mindful of what airspace I could potentially be getting close to. And the other thing is, I was talking about minimum altitudes. We've got 820 here, 230 there. We've got 433 here. We've got 446 there. So throughout this, I would be flying on QNH. So in other words, we take off with the altimeter reading 231 feet, and I would be aiming to stay above 2,500 feet. Below that, I will be only probably about 2,000 feet above the ground, at which point I would be looking for fields. Right. So I can use that. It's not too different all the way down. So I don't have to have different legs with different heights that I would count as the minimum. So so I've now got that sorted out in mind as to what I want to be doing. I also, anybody like me, I tend to have to peer at maps to see what the small writing says. So any radio frequencies that I'm likely to use, again, I will write in permanent ink. Same with the wind. I'll write in permanent ink where it is and what the frequency is. So again, I'm not having to waste time with the map in front of me or head down in the cockpit trying to read out what's saying. So we've got Taton Hill, we've got Birmingham, which is the zone, possibly East Midlands, and then Husbands Bosworth. If anybody has got a half-mil map, you'll see that Husbos does not have its frequency alongside it. So then you have to go and research it. There's several ways of doing that. And one is going to Husbands Bosworth site. The other one, there is a matrix which is on the BGA website, which gives the frequencies of all the clubs that are on. Right, so there are various ways of looking at it. So in other words, you can't just jump into your glider and go down there and land at Husbos, because it will be a rather unfriendly act just to barge into their circuit without telling them what the hell's going on. Right, what I've also identified down here, this line here, and I don't write anything on the map, but what I try to do is look at a largish feature just beyond where I'm going, so that I know if I've overshot. Some airfields, if we're going to an airfield, are actually quite difficult to see if you've got sunny conditions and they're in shadow or something like that. They're maybe not all that obvious. So just to do an idea, I've got here, I've got, as we'll look at in a minute, we've got a motorway which I should be going at roughly 90 degrees to. But if I'm going to a major road at a tangent, that's probably going to be the A14. So in which case I need to be narrowed down exactly where I am. Okay, so the other things en route, I'm going to have what I call fixed points. So I'll be going to Hickson first of all, roughly. Another one, so I know how well I'm doing. I've got the, it's actually the old Lichfield airfield, and I can't remember the name, Fradley, that's it. And there's a couple of microlight sites there. It stands out quite well. There's an industrial estate on the old airfield. And of course, those are the bits of airspace which are close by. Next one, we've got a nice one there, which is the M42. Again, I should be going roughly at 90 degrees to it. And if you notice here, we've got the Tamworth area, which is a built-up area, which should be over to my right. So again, I'm not being exact on locating. I'm just getting a general idea as to where things will be. And again, we've got those areas of airspace which I could be getting close to. Next one, we've got Nuneaton, which is an old airfield, favourite of mine. Whatever you do, don't land there. That's what's called MIRA, which is the Motor Industries Research Association, and they do prototype testing there and all sorts of things. And they're very, very touchy who goes there. Having been there on many occasions in Rolls-Royce and Bentleys, they are very, very secretive. And anybody who does land there, they'll probably take 3 or 4 days to get the glider out. They'll let you go, but they'll keep the glider while it's checked for, or you have to prove that there are no cameras on board or anything like that. And then final one, I've already mentioned it, will be the motorway. Probably you can see Husbands Bosworth at that point. Okay, so now I've got little waypoints mentally marked off. Sometimes you may even physically mark them off, and it gives you an idea of your rate of progress. So how do we work these out? So when we are flying, I always say when you turn, head towards a reference and then double check your compass. Are you going in approximately the right direction? So in the early days, until you practice it, draw them out with a protractor. So a protractor, the normal aeronautical one is a square one. And what you do is you line it up with the grid lines. So one of your vertical lines sits on there. So there's your route. And you've now got your protractor, and the center of it sits in the roughly the middle of the route. And then you read off what the heading is. In this case, it's 125. That you can write on your map, and that then gives you a direction that you will be roughly traveling in, plus or minus 30 degrees, unless you make a deliberate decision to go at 90 degrees or something like that. So once you've done that, you've now got your route sorted out. You've got for the main leg, you've got the average course that you're hoping to achieve. So the next thing you've got to do is prepare for arriving at Husbands Bosworth. And my apologies to the BGA, but I've modified their Wolf circuit joining procedure, and I've put R in front of it, and that's just a radio call, just to tell them that you're in the vicinity and ask for landing information. Now 250, I think their runway is 230 if I remember correctly. So you could quite legitimately guess that you're going to be landing on 23, but you don't know for certain. So you can then ask for them for that information. W is water ballast if you've got it on board, jettison it, but also wind direction. Just see, is the wind direction still as you're expecting it to be? Undercarriage down, of course, loose articles, tighten your straps up. When I'm flying cross country, I always loosen my shoulder straps so I can move around. And I've also got butty boxes and things like that scattered around me. So before you get anywhere near the circuit, tighten your straps up and tidy up the cockpit. And then if you've got flaps on the glider, flaps as appropriate. Here's Husbos. This is taken from their website. And this illustrates the importance of doing some research of a site that you're going into. Because to north side circuits, the tugs go south side, and they tend to do circuits at 300 feet. Visiting power aircraft do a south side circuit at 800 feet. And there is another factor as well, which is not shown on here. If you can see my pointer, if you see where it says tugs 300, that is actually a private strip where a few light aircraft operate out of. So you can see it's quite important that the gliders do remain on that side. And quite a few sites do have their own procedures for circuits. So it's important that you do your research beforehand. Okay, right, what I've got an illustration here is this is an actual flight that I did. I wasn't going to Husbands Bosworth, I was actually going to Market Harbour, and then I went down into the Cotswolds where I landed out. But just in terms of planning and reinforcing what Derek was saying on his session, you can see here, if I can get my cursor going, here I'm taking off, climbing out, excuse me, releasing, doing a few climbs, getting used to what was going on. And my last circle was there. And obviously there is some thermal activity here. But what I did is I diverted to fly directly over the site and then went to go and do a climb. Then there's another climb here, another small climb there, a climb here, and you'll notice this is in the Hickson area. Then a straight dash down here, small climb, obviously didn't work, a slightly longer climb, which was working a bit better, a straight dash, a longer climb here, a straight dash, small climb here, and that's, I don't think that one was from memory, this was about 3 or 4 years ago. It was only a small amount of thermaling here, and then a long dash, and then a longer amount of thermaling there, which I know was actually 2 thermals. I was turning one very, very poor rate of climb, left it, and very quickly moved over, probably only about half a mile, and then got a better climb across to one here, another climb here, and again I deliberately moved across to where the sky was better. Now I knew from my planning here was 4,500 feet. Down here I was working between 2,500 and 3,500 feet, which was the cloud base. Here it was opening up a little bit, and he was going up, if I remember correctly, went up to 4,000. Another couple of climbs, and then I continued on and down to Market Harbour. 1 hour 27 in that between there and Market Harbour. But the point being is that I'm using this to illustrate the fact that the wind was 220 at 15, not dissimilar to the example that I showed you early on. And I was quite happy to start off operating down the western side of the gap because I knew any climbs would be taking me to the east. And it worked out, for that leg anyway, it worked out quite nicely. Okay, so that's just an illustration of not a typical flight, but a flight using that route. Okay, anybody got any questions at this point? Good, that gave me a chance to drink my beer. So, Mike Fox in his talk intimated about the use of checklists, and I'm a firm believer in that as well. This isn't exhaustive, but these are the sort of things that you should have done before you even think about getting near the aeroplane. So you got your route decided and plotted. If you've got GPS kit, which I do advocate, which has got up-to-date charts installed on it, you put it in whatever you're using. You've checked that the glider is serviceable, tire pressures, etc. Okay, you've got a fully charged battery. Plus, you are supposed to carry the ARC insurance certificate. Sorry, the ARC and insurance certificate. And you can be challenged. Unlikely to be, but you can be challenged. Make sure that you've got drinking water or refreshment of some type. Some people use energy drinks. Food and any other personal items that you want to take. And don't forget the hat in amongst these things. A mobile phone, which is fully charged, or you take an external battery pack with you. If you do land out, mobile phone is extremely useful. It's also very useful for when you go to the Maps app. You can share your position with people who are going to retrieve you. And they may want to contact you as you're going on. So a fully charged phone is a must, in my opinion. The club informs. Again, Derek was talking about a Silver Sea distance. Remember, you have to have permission off the duty instructor of what route you're going to do, and if possible, you've also go to the official observer, who then checks everything is okay in terms of logging. A PLB, not many people have got them. I know Mike Fox does. PLB is a personal locator beacon. So if you land somewhere and you need help, then you can activate the PLB, and then emergency services will get to you very, very quickly. There was, I think he used it, I'm not absolutely sure, but there was an instance last year where somebody did a field landing and unfortunately didn't see some wire which stretched across the field. And he went through it, and it shattered the canopy and pinned him in the cockpit. He couldn't get out. And I'm not sure, but I think he activated a PLB, which got the emergency services to him. The trailer is checked and roadworthy. If you are going to be, even if it's a club aircraft, it's your responsibility to check that the trailer has been checked and roadworthy. Because remember, if you have got to be collected, somebody has got to tow it. And a retrieve crew agreed in case needed, which follows on from that. And also take some cash with you and proof of identity in case of, oh, that's my spelling, in case of a failed landing or even a field landing. There is BGA advice on their website as to what to do after you've landed in a field. The basics of it are try and talk to the farmer, apologise for trespassing, and get his cooperation to enable you to get the glider out of the field. If you've landed in crop, he may want payment for it, and there is an agreement with the National Farmers Union that the insurance company, and it's part of the insurance, will pay for it. If possible, take your fully charged mobile phone and take pictures of where you've landed, just in case there's any sort of disagreement as to what damage was caused. Okay.
So on the trail, it's probably worth mentioning, and we all do this when we rig. We tend to leave our crap lying around the trailer, all sorts of bits. So if someone does need to come and collect you, the first thing they're going to think is, what kit do I need? So I think it would be, try to keep all the kit that is likely to be needed, if not inside the trailer, at least close enough to your own trailer so that people that come and rescue you know which bits they need to bring.
Yeah, well, etiquette says that if you're doing a cross country, you put everything away. But as you quite rightly say, that is not always the case.
Just one question.
Is, well, it is. Go on. So someone was saying something then.
Sorry, I was just going to mention, Paul, you're talking about using a mobile phone to locate yourself using a map. But there's the brilliant app called What 3 Words, which is being used extensively now. And if you download that on your phone, whatever location you are on the planet, it will give you 3 words with which the emergency services and a lot of general public now use, and you can instantly locate exactly where someone is to 1 square meter from that 3-word code.
Yeah, that's brilliant. We've actually got that as part of our emergency procedure at Seiford. Yeah. I must admit I haven't downloaded it on my phone, but most people have got maps on it. So either or is perfectly acceptable. The important thing is so we can get to you quickly. Right. Okay. So threat and error management. So factors before flight. Weather, you should be tracking it, seeing what's happening. You should be aware of any airborne traffic, air shows, flying competitions and so on, and your own preparation. That is a possibility of it going wrong. So make sure you're well prepared. Right. If somebody turns up and says, I want to do my silver today, and I'll say, well, okay, what's your route? And they turn around and say, not absolutely sure, you're not going to get permission because it's an indication you haven't done your preparation. During the flight, look out airborne traffic, tiredness. You know, we hear people, some of the more experienced guys in the club, they're talking about doing 300, 500 Ks and so on. And they are able to relax while flying. The probability is in the early days, your nervous exhaustion will come in and you'll feel tired because you're on the lookout, you're worried where you are, you're worried if you're getting low, am I going to get to the next thermal, and so on. So it's quite easy to get tired. So just be aware of that. And part of that will be making sure that you're hydrated and have food, which is why it's in the checklist. Distractions as well. You know, if your GPS information is playing up, don't play about with it. Okay, you know roughly where you are, so you can look at the map. And airspace, you know, going into airspace inadvertently. Actually, today you shouldn't do that. If you're going into airspace, you can either call them up and say, I'd like to thermal and get out, then get out of your airspace, or don't go in it. You can't just go in it because that's what gets the gliding movement a bad name. And what about after flight? Okay, don't forget, you're going to be tired. Possibly the retrieve crew, if you need them, are going to be tired as well, because they've probably been flying during the day. And it's interesting, most land outs occur in the late afternoon. So then you've got the evening and the drain of the day to consider. De-rigging issues. De-rigging accidents and incidents occur when at the end of a long day and a hot day, when people are tired. So you have to be really careful when you're doing that. Jumping on now, if you have done your silver, this is the form that you've got to fill in. Loads of stuff in there, and it's what glider is, and you put there which type of badge that you're looking for. But onto the next page, and what you have to do is get official observers' signatures. Or if you've landed out somewhere, say at Husbands Bosworth, you can get somebody to sign it at the club, or you have to then, as I'll show in a moment, you have to present it to our own official observers to make sure that the trace is correct. So there's lots of signatures that are required. So on arriving back at the club, first of all, if needed, have you observed retrieval etiquette? And that is, it varies. In the old days, it used to be a dinner, but that was in long retrieves, which went far into the night. Nowadays, we tend to be quicker because of things like, as we've just said, what 3 words and the map apps. But even so, do pay back any fuel that's been used, and perhaps a beer for the people that have come along and helped out. If you've got back, make sure that you've secured the glider and remove the batteries, but also remove your logger or SD card and hand it to the official observer so the flight can be verified. I hope Derek will come into it later on, but if you do a flight and then you rock up a day or 2 days later and say, oh, here's my flight, there's no chain or immediate chain to prove that it's your flight, which is what
you shouldn't download the flight and just hand the SD card to the OO. You said leave it in the logger and get the OO to download it himself.
Yeah.
Or you can download it under his guidance.
I think it's is it acceptable to, certainly in the farm unit, you can take the SD card out. It's okay to take the SD card and hand that in. Is that right, Derek?
To be honest, I don't know actually. I think the safest thing is leave it in the logger until you're with an OO, and the pair of you don't download it there. And I think
right.
That's the safest.
Yeah, but the point being is, don't just think, oh, I've done it. You've got to prove you've done it. Even if you've landed at Husbands Bosworth and we've retrieved you from there. Also, if the glider is to be de-rigged, help, but remember that you might be tired. Right, so just be very, very careful. And also, I've experienced this myself. There's been a few occasions when I've been driving home from the club, where, because I drive on the motorway, I find myself suddenly realizing I've no idea what happened in the last half mile. Right, so you can be tired as well. Okay, that's it for me in terms of map preparation or flight preparation for a badge attempt or something like that. Any questions which I can't answer?
Could I just add one thing, Paul?
Yeah.
Probably the two favourite routes for silver are either to Husbos or to Shobden.
Yeah.
Now, and at both of those, technically, you could get an aerotow retrieve from the club at which you've landed at. That is worth discussing again with our own duty instructor as to whether that would be sensible in your case, on the kind of day. I mean, let's say it had been done this afternoon, which is a very, very hot day. Then the level of tiredness and the adrenaline drop, it's probably far better to be retrieved.
Yeah. On top of that as well, I deliberately didn't mention it because in the old days of the rally, what we would do is, certainly if it's been a silver flight, a long aerotow is actually very tiring.
Yeah.
And it's not for those that are inexperienced. And what we used to do in the days of the rally is we would take an experienced pilot down with us in the rally. They would then get in the glider and be aerotowed for 40 minutes, which is a long time on aerotow.
I actually did that in Daisy for Warren's flight back from Husbos.
Yeah.
And it was quite a tiring flight.
It is, and it's a long time. It's also quite expensive nowadays. I had a retrieve from Shennington, which is Edge Hill. Retrieve because I'd landed there late in the evening, and that was 180 quid. So yes, it's possible, but we would still get somebody there by road to fly it, and then it's very expensive. So really, nowadays it's a grand retrieve that we're talking about. Thanks for that, Derek.
Just one thing: if you go on a long tow, do use the low tow position. It's much safer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on that note, is it worth it if you're getting to a stage where you think a 50k is a realistic option to actually practice a low tow at the club? To say, I want to practice low tow because I think I might have to use this, or a retrieve from, because I know when I've landed out, one of the options was to get the tuggy to land and then aerotow out of the field. So those two skills, as you progress, is that something that we as students should be asking for?
Towing out of fields is very fraught.
I'm not a current duty instructor, but I think I'd generally be fairly loath to agree to the applicant doing the aerotow back. I'd much rather twist his arm into sending a retrieve crew.
Yeah, I just to illustrate that, as I said, I had an aerotow back from Shennington, but unfortunately we didn't have any help to launch me. So in effect, I was doing a field aerotow with nobody on the wingtip, and I deliberately offset the glider by about 30 degrees from the wing that was on the ground, and it went about 30 degrees either side before I got full control. So it's not for a low experienced pilot. At some point, addressing Tiago's question, yeah, by all means, have a go at practice the low tow. But if I'm a duty instructor and it's a Silver Sea or even early Silver Sea, and they've landed in the field and they're saying they want a field retrieve, I would decline that request and say we'll send somebody to you.
Okay.
Good question from me, Paul, about planning. Obviously, I'm at that stage where I'm starting to work towards, with you, obviously the bronze and then the cross-country endorsement. One of the things that I've wanted to find a tool to do is to plot a flight, say a triangle, using BGA turning points. And I've not yet found a website or a tool with which to do that. Am I missing something? Is there a website that I need to be able to go, okay, well, I want to do a 50K triangle, say, and a map that overlays the BGA turning points and then calculates a route with a distance, etc.?
The best one that I know of, and again, it's a free download, is XCSAW, which you can put on your phone. But what it doesn't do is an awful lot of geographical features, but it does all otherwise what you're saying. You can put in turning points and it will give you distances and so on. You can even put in a polar curve of a glider that you're going to be flying and it will give you speeds and so on and times. So Peter Gill and Derek, do you know of anything better?
Well, you can still download for free the old TaskNav program.
Yeah.
And put in the current BGA turn points, or if you want to pay for a more up-to-date one, then it will be CU. But TaskNav, I use that for many years.
Fine as well. If you're looking at the NOTAMs, allows you to plot a route using BGA turn points, so you can see your
Yes, you're quite right.
overlaid with NOTAMs as well.
Yes.
Yeah. You can download them into SkyDemon as well. I don't know if you can in the free version of SkyDemon, but certainly the paid one does.
Yeah. So the answer is yes, and there's a few around, and it's what you're most comfortable in. I use XCSAW probably the most.
Yeah, Peter and Phil on the chat have both recommended Seth and Amanda.co.uk.
Right.
They've both recommended that website, so thanks, guys.
Yeah, you can play around with that, and that you can set triangles, and it shows you all the BGA turn points on Google Maps, so it's quite handy. I've got another question, Paul. Is it sensible to plan on a good day, and if one is to set off early enough to fly back, and you know, set that as a goal to maybe just overfly the other airfield, get the turning point logged, and then just try to fly back through the gap?
No problem. Yeah, if you've got enough time, and the conditions look as though they're going to last all day. I certainly don't have an issue with that. Peter and Derek have got more experience of it than me. But what are your thoughts, guys?
If you read Winning on the Wind, George Moffat's book about his silver distance, it'll put you off forever.
No, but yes, you can do that. I think it for me it would be part of the morning prep, and I'd be looking at RAS the same as you, Paul, and I'd do blip spots at the times where I expected to be at those points, which will give me some idea as to whether the day is likely to last that long. I think one thing to bear in mind, the best wind direction for Husbos is from the northwest. From the northwest, we're likely to get hit later in the afternoon by the Cheshire Gap problem. So I think in a northwest wind, you're going to have a shorter day. So you might find it more difficult to get back because your aim is to do the silver distance. So you're not going to go too early. You're going to go in the best part of the day to make it easier for yourself. So getting back could be a difficulty if you're still planning to be in the air, say 4:30, 4, 4:30
The other problem,
or later.
the other problem you've got is if you go down, say, with a 10-knot tailwind to Husbos, and turn around, you've now got a 10-knot headwind coming back. That's 20 knots different, and that will come off your average cross-country speed.
Okay, so it's most sensible just to assume get the silver distance. Don't worry about the retrieve hassle and everything else. Just get the distance and land there and call it a day.
If you do the 50k, you'd probably turn around somewhere like Misha and head back. It's actually quicker to get to Husbos, to carry on to Husbos, and then get a road retrieve.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Not having done it as well, I'm guessing that once you know that the 50k is in the bag, there's a natural, you relax a bit more because you say, it's done, and you kind of just want the flight to get it done because you've done it. Whilst if you still have to concentrate probably a bit hard on the return leg, there's an element like Paul was saying about human factors that you're just not going to be as switched on because in your mind you've done it.
Well, yeah, but it's only a successful flight when you've done a successful landing.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you want to do the return leg, as Peter says, you're going into wind. You're more than doubling your chance of having to do a land out.
As we found out on the example of Peter's flight the other week.
Yeah, I thought someone would bring that up.
And if Peter is landing out, what hope have we got? Just land at the other end.
I just have a question about an error to back to the airfield. How does that work? Do they just take you to a height so you've got a final glide, or do they bring you right back to sort of?
No, you'd probably say, take me to 4,000 foot at Abbott's Bromley at Blithfield Reservoir. And as long as it's not a howling gale from the northwest, you would very easily straight glide back to Seifert from there.
Yeah, the thing is you can pull the bung when you want to, because you're going to be releasing. But what happens is, unlike a normal tow, which is you get charged for height, in a retrieve you get charged for time.
Right.
So even though you've released, the tug is still flying back to the field.
This sounds like a daft question, but if I'm going to do my 50k and there's not a cat and owl's chance of me flying back from Husbos back to Seifert, is it not worth sending the retrieve team out to meet when I land? So you're not then having got the delay of waiting for the retrieve team. You might as well almost plan it as part of your flight.
You might not get there.
I like the confident approach. You say you're definitely
Brilliant
going to
question.
get that. That's great. That's exactly the attitude to have.
Yeah.
I'm guessing retrieve crews are a bit like thermals. They never where you need them.
I think in terms of going back to the use of RAST, for instance, if you've got a track distance likelihood of 300k, that is what I would feel saying, well, okay, that's reasonable conditions for somebody to do a Silver Sea in distance. Yeah. Right. So in terms of, if the conditions are going to be that bad, you're definitely not going to get back, then we wouldn't send you in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
What we want is good conditions so that you feel comfortable flying from one thermal to another without too many hassles. So the conditions will probably be much better than the distance, in appropriateness for the distance that you're going to fly.
Yeah, yeah. So my confidence is well founded then to send the retrieve team to meet me when I land.
Yeah, well, it's if somebody's going to do a silver attempt this hour and a land at Husbos, well, that's in our regime in which we can say, okay, well, we'll send somebody to go and meet you.
You can guarantee you'll get ribbed in the bar afterwards when you land about 2 fields away from the airfield. Like a Stafford, and you have to phone them back.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
As I think on the land outs, one thing that I've learned, if you do land, 2 or 3 fields in from the road, don't stand in the field, go to the road, because chances are your retrieve crew will go up and down in the gate without actually knowing where you are.
Yeah, I landed out with Simon Watson, didn't I? Remember last year, and
yes, yeah.
And this is what I was saying about that What 3 Words app, because obviously we're fairly local to the airfield. We weren't too far away at all, but if you were in the middle of nowhere, you wouldn't have a clue where you are because it's hedge road country lanes, isn't it? You're in a field. There's no real landmarks. That's why I thought that What 3 Words is really good, because not just you would know where you are because you've got a GPS on your phone or your device, but trying to explain that to somebody else. That's why that What 3 Words I think is really useful.
But about 25 years ago, one of our members did a Silver Sea, landed out near Newtown in Wales, and she decided she would meet the crew in the nearest pub. By the time they got there, she was so plastered that she couldn't find the glider again. It took about 2 hours to find the field.
One other valid point. I've landed out in a field that required 9 club members in the retrieve crew to get the glider out of the field. So if you've only sent 2 people in a car to Husbos and you've not quite made it, it won't work.
You need a coach. Book a coach.
Yeah.
Book a minibus.
Oh my God.
Brilliant.
Right. Any more questions?
Let me say thank you to him.
Yeah.
It's not you.
Okay, that's a pleasure. A very quick word going off piece just for a second. In case you hadn't heard, we are planning and flying this weekend. We are, at the moment, I am monitoring the weather and it's not looking good for Saturday. And also we've got quite a few people there. So we've got to make sure that we keep the old social distancing going. So those that are going down this weekend, please make sure that they don't congregate in the clubhouse. We'll be meeting outside and we'll probably be briefing in the hangar so that it's a little bit more of a wide open space. There's another thing as well. There is a service bulletin come out on Asteers, which gives you either 25 hours grace or well, not all, a backstop of August. I think it's the 1st.
1st of August.
Yeah, 1st of August, where they have to be grounded for checks to be carried out. We've already checked the twin Asteers, which were in this service bulletin, but luckily, our 2 twins were not in the group that are affected. So just in case you haven't heard of that, that's something that you've got to look at. And also we've got to think about workshop space for doing this, because unfortunately it does involve some glass fibre repairs to be carried out as a result of the inspection.
Can I do an update on that, Paul?
Sorry?
I'll do an update on that. I think all the Asteers on site will be able, it's the pushrod tube to the elevator in the fin. And having reread the note, I think we'll be able to do them simply by taking the rudder off.
Yeah, the single Asteers, yeah, it's like Peter said, you just take the rod off. The one you need to do the drill is on the acros.
Yeah.
Everything else is straightforward.
Just in case if you've read it, it is an inspector issue because it's a primary flight control. You need approval to do it. It doesn't mean you could actually do the work, but it needs to be supervised. Otherwise, it can't be signed off. I've had a look at Hun already without taking it apart yet. I don't think we're going to have any problems. Keeping my fingers crossed. It's basically anywhere where water has got into the fin and into that tube and caused corrosion at the bottom of the tube.
So Peter, is it? I know you're putting some sort of plan together, but considering there's going to be quite a lot of demand for parts, is it worth going ahead and ordering some in the view of then reselling to other clubs, or just wait?
I'd say just wait. I'm guessing that the incidence is going to be quite low.
Okay.
But we'll have a look. We do need to inhibit, once we take it apart, we do then need to inhibit the push rod and then put it back together.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be quite rare that we have a problem.
Because I had a look.
If you spend a lot of time on a hillside, picketed outside, you can expect a problem.
Okay. Yeah, because I had a look. The inhibiting stuff is about 20 quid. The push rod with shipping and stuff, it's getting close to 400 quid.
I'm not surprised. And I would think this might well end up applying to other types of gliders. Like those are, lots of the Grobs were built by Grob, obviously. They also boast a number of standard Cirrus. So sorry, Paul.
The irony,
anyway.
The irony of it is that on the SB they say, well, the twin Asteers are not affected because we realize steel is a really bad idea, so we replace it with aluminium.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are quite a few Asteer twin twos where they've had a problem with the aluminium pushrod and they've replaced it with a steel one, so they still have to be inspected.
Yeah, they did mention that as well.
Yeah. I wouldn't take on this one. We've had a quick look in, and it's probably only going to take about 2 hours on each aircraft to do the check.
Because in my case, there's no chance I'm going to be flying anytime soon. And then with the 25-hour grace period, it's actually quite a lot. It's more around the demand for parts if there is a huge fallout rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is it's an SB at the moment, not an AD, but the AD might follow very quickly.
Is Sierra Tango, has the annual been done on Sierra Tango now?
Yeah, I finished it on Sunday, and I've got the Pete Whitehead. I'm meeting him at Cypher tomorrow to do the ARC survey, and it should be signed off, so we'll be ready to air a tow on Saturday.
Brilliant. Yeah. As long as it's not 25 knots gusting 35.
Yeah, yeah, that's my hope.
I'm doing the pushrod check on Hun on Friday.
Right. Somebody said Paul there. Got lost.
Yeah, me. Reference visiting the club. I noticed that Tony put a thing out about there was too many on Saturday. Could you swap over to Sunday? Yeah. What sort of numbers? If you're not flying and you're visiting for a short time, what's the policy?
Right. We haven't put numbers on it because what we're planning to do is based on what we experienced this weekend, we will then put guidelines out. My feeling, for what it's worth, is that I don't want to stop people coming down to the club, even though it might contravene the government's description of large groups gathering. But I don't want to stop people coming down. Having said that, people will be spread out and there becomes a larger target. So whilst we can be gathering around the clubhouse, for instance, and please don't use these figures as gospel, but for the sake of argument, say we need 10 people to operate the field, then I would expect no more than 12, for instance, to be on the field, and the rest would be to be in a safe area where they're practicing non-social distancing. Thereafter, as people cycle through to do ground jobs, flying or whatever, then those we swap between the flying side and the social side. That's my feeling at the moment. If you put in rules and regulations right away, my feeling is that they could end up being inappropriate. So I'd rather get a bit of experience of how things happen, and to be quite honest, how well people socially distance. Then that will then dictate as to what we turn around and say will be the policy for the club.
Are there any additional jobs that can be done at the club? We've got the grass under control, and I guess the aircraft and all the machines are, they had their engine runs and everything else. So is there anything else that can be done in the week, for instance, by individuals?
I don't think so. There might be something that's crept through, but the aircraft that are going to fly have been checked, with the exception of Chuffle, that hasn't had a ground run yet. Chuffle will be operating for a short time, then it's due to go for its annual anyway. But the Lima Tango and the K8 at the moment have not been checked. But based on experience from when was it, Sunday, when we did the fleet, it took about an hour per aircraft.
Yeah, we actually spent about 2 hours, but that's the way we work.
Yeah. But so we can bring the others online quite quickly.
Okay.
The fee, we haven't run some of the Discovery for the last few days, but it was running okay last time, and both the winches were checked within the last week. So
Okay.
We're hot to trot basically.
Okay. I took all the buggies out and they're all refueled and they'll have oil in them. So if there's anything, because I don't think there's a point of me coming down on the weekend. It sounds like you've got enough hands to operate the airfield. But if there are little jobs that can be done, I do have time in the week. I can pop down for half a day or a couple of hours and get things done.
Right. That's fantastic. Thanks very much for that. We, at the moment, I am planning on operating Wednesdays and weekends as per normal. And also, wherever possible, we'll have self-auth days for those that are self-authorizing and the criteria that I've put out already. Then we will operate during the week as well.
Is that criteria negotiable if somebody's current on power flying?
No. If I can't fly, you can't fly.
No. Well, what I've got to do, again, it's evidence-based. So, providing the experienced group of pilots don't have any cock-ups, and I'm speaking quite frankly here, providing they don't have crack-ups, then I will look at extending it. But bearing in mind that as soon as the British Hang Gliding Association and I think British Parasailing Association opened up for people to start flying again. First weekend, they had 3 accidents, which ended in people being using the air ambulance.
So I think what you're saying, Paul, is that if we're not allowed to fly, so the people with low hours, we know exactly who we can go and blame for this.
Yes.
which makes it a lot easier.
Gee, thanks. I think I'll take my name off on Sunday then.
Just a bit of advice for me, because I was helping the guys at Tate Hill today, and obviously you have to do the rig. It's when you rig a glider, especially something like an Aster or something big that has very big, heavy wings, the tendency is going to be, especially at the root, to have two people in very close contact to pick up the wing.
Yeah.
So if you're helping someone rig their glider, be mindful not only that it's their glider and it's their show, but also have a bit of a talk about how you're going to do it. And if you need something like mask, gloves, whatever both of you need, have that discussion before, because you can't even imagine how easy it is to like not even think about it. And if you have to push a glider, you'll see two people on the same side of the glide and then go, hold on a minute, we shouldn't be doing this. So take your time, talk with the people you're helping to see what you want to do, because it's so natural for us to rig a glider, push a glider. We don't even think about it. And unfortunately now we just have to think a bit more.
Yeah, I would echo that. It's if you look at the government guidelines, which I did a couple of hours ago, because if you look on the BGA website, it then directs you to the CAA, which then directs you to the government website. And what it says is on occasions where people, and it says working, have to work within 2 meters of each other, they should as a minimum use a face mask. So therefore, if anybody's involved in rigging or anything like that, my suggestion is to make sure they've got a face mask and they wear it. Yeah, common sense rules.
And
or
try to get
the bell.
Yeah. And if you're helping, obviously, again, the tendency is, oh, I want to help, I want to be useful. Make sure that what you help, or you're providing a hand with something that you can do. If you're familiar with rigging, help rigging. If you're not, if you're not sure what to do and when, just get someone else to do it, because you kind of have to be as sleek as you can and not get on each other's way.
Yeah, and as will be briefed at the weekend, there's going to be a regime of disinfectant available for surfaces to be washed. There will be a limited amount of PPE, but I'll reiterate that please turn up with your own PPE. And what I'm trying to do is, at the moment, I'm taking it is that we're all grown-ups. We are supposed to be sensible. And until proven otherwise, I'll treat you as such. If proven otherwise, I will shout and rant, and then the procedures which come out next week will be quite draconian.
Paul, just on the subject of hygiene, so would it be worth on each flying day to have somebody volunteer or appointed, a bit like the duty pilot, to be a sort of hygiene monitor? And they are the ones who have got the job of making sure things are wiped and that it's not something overlooked.
Possibly, but by the same token, that's another person in the routine that could be spreading the infection. At the moment, I am minded of, and this is probably what I'll brief at the weekend, is that people will volunteer for jobs and they stay with that job, and they will have the equipment and to do that job, which they will be responsible for until such time as they're relieved. And on changeover, all the materials are cleaned. So if somebody's going to be a wingtip orderly for an aircraft, they stay with that aircraft. If somebody's going to be putting the cables on, only they put the cables on. And it may be splitting that one person put the cables on, another on the wingtip. I don't know how it's going to pan out yet. If somebody's the duty pilot, for instance, on handover, they will hand over the radios, which will be the VHF and the management radio, and clean them. And the person incoming cleans them before he starts using them. That's kind of the regime that I'm looking at. Also, wingtips and aircraft noses will be cleaned. There'll be buckets available at the launch point with disinfectant and wipes on, so that they can then be used for wiping down those surfaces. I'll consider your idea, Bill, but at the moment I'm not overly receptive towards it, because you've then got a person running around from one person to another saying, "Have you cleaned?" Okay, any more questions?
Not a question, but just something that's been put in place where I work, although I'm not in work, I'm sitting at home. They've changed the CPR procedure, that you don't actually give mouth to mouth, you only give heart massage.
I'll never give mouth to mouth anyway.
No, but I'm explaining that procedure has been rewritten, so first aids only have to do heart massage and no mouth to mouth, and that is something that you may want to consider if there was an accident or you needed to do first aid.
Yeah, the last time I did a first aid course, they were saying that the mouth to mouth bit is actually virtually superfluous now.
Exactly.
But it's still in the procedure until it's altered.
It's in the procedure, but it went quite some time ago. Certainly when AIDS came in, it was then put. They looked at it and they said, well, if you're doing compressions in the proper way, you're actually clearing the airways and it draws in air anyway. So yeah, I take your mind, take your point on that one. But
yeah, and well, the other time you don't do mouth to mouth is if it's a drowning, because they'd be blocked in waterway anyway. But it's, I mean, you can get mouth shields, but it's just because they've done it. I was just making you aware, and exactly what you said. A GP said to me today that it's because people do it inefficiently, the pumping up and down is just as good.
The problem is, unless you tilt the head back in the correct position, you can blow into the mouth as long as you like. You're not going to get it into the airways. So the chances of doing it right, unless you've been properly trained, are pretty remote. And the properly trained people don't do it anyway. So, you know, it's a catch-22.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, but thanks for the comment. Yeah, it highlights to people as to what's happening. And that's one of the things we've got to do in terms of emergencies is the thought about what we do if we respond to an emergency.
So, Paul, just going back a bit, you talked about the changeovers. Is it better then, for the time being, to, instead of having 2 duty pilots, to try to get a list of volunteers to do the full day duty pilot, so you sort of minimize that handover?
You can do in the short term, yes, that would be ideal. Longer term, I would revert back to. If you duty anything, you're supposed to be duty all day. But by the same token, if you're in a ground role, like the winch, like the duty pilot, it's nice to get your backside off the ground, and there will be a handover. So in this period where we're doing limited flying, I think it's advantageous to either have limit it to 1 or 2 during the day, just so we can spread the experience. But when we come back to dual flying, then I would hope we can revert back to the way it was before, which is if you're on duty for the day, unless you're going to go for a local flight.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions? Really, these are going questions in other areas, but no, I'm quite happy to field anything that comes out.
I would just like to say, in the name of the people with low hours, that we will be fairly treated if the high hours cock it up. I think we should be given a chance to do it and then make an assessment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, it's just my way of putting pressure on the high, at the end.
Oh, absolutely, because if they fluff it, then that gives us a bigger chance. But, don't just write us off straight away.
I've got 150 hours, but I didn't get me 50k, and I think I need a check flight before I start again.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Who's ever brave enough to land one with me? They'll be fine, I'm sure.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Hopefully see you on Sunday.
Next week, everyone, is Tiago giving a talk on from solo to bronze and beyond. So next week,
Hero to zero.
0 to 0, yeah.
The problem with that, Paul, is that at some point he would have to be a hero. It's quite narrow to go from 0 to 0 or to a bigger 0. You know.
Thanks,
Not
Paul.
as catchy.
Okay, cheers. Look forward to seeing you all, guys.
Brilliant,
And
guys.
gals.
Cheers, bye.
Well done.